Hey, Kevin, can you hear me?
Yes. Hey.
I have my video off just because I'm the timekeeper and I have kind of a weird setup going over here.
How are we doing? How are you going to do the time thing? Is it visual or audio?
So we'll go over that. It's a little jankety, I have to say. It's not my preferred setting, but I'll show you. I will have this off most of the time, and you'll get a 20-second warning.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And then a stop.
Okay.
And so whatever your configuration is, make sure you can see me.
I know. My first one, it totally disappeared on me. It went bloop, and I was like, oh no.
It happened in the first online forum we did too. Remember when there was 8 city council candidates? Yeah. And so like there was too many boxes, you know?
And they get moving and then.
And so that's why I said, whatever you need to do, stretch your screen, whatever, so that you can see me, so that you know when to stop. That's an important one.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, this is Tyler.
Kevin. Kevin Hyinga.
Hyinga, that's it.
Hyinga. Good. Yeah. One thing I want to ask you, and I'll ask each person, do you have strong opinions about how I refer to you throughout the discussion? Mr. Hyinga, Kevin?
Either or. I'm first name is fine.
Master and Commander?
No, first name is actually fine.
Okay.
You know, if you want to go Kevin, it's cool.
Very cool.
Yeah. All right, I think we're good. Test audio.
I do want to wait for Blake and David to join us, and then we'll quickly go over the rules and any questions anybody has.
I'm gonna shut
Did you have any?
I was just asking Emily. So just how the time stuff was going to go. I think I'm pretty cool.
It's distracting enough to catch one's eye when they're even when they're in the midst of impassioned discussion.
Yeah, yeah.
So Blake is, I think, clicked the regular person link and not the candidate link. So we'll.
Oh, I can make him a panelist if he's in the. Nope, he's not in attendees. Oh, we haven't gone live yet. That's why. There he is.
Hello.
We are. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
I am good.
How's it going, Blake?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
Good. Yourself?
Yeah.
All right, turn my audio off.
Okay. I think we've got everybody now.
Okay. Do you want to go over anything?
Yeah, I do. I just want to make sure I see David's name. David, are you here?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us. I'll go over the rules rather quickly and then want to leave a little bit of time for questions. And this is the same document I sent everyone, but basically I'm the moderator. I'll give, Emily's going to introduce the forum and introduce me. I will introduce each of you very briefly, and I'll follow that up by giving you each 2 minutes for an opening statement. We'll move on to question and answer portion, which is broken into 3 categories. One is 3 key county issues. I'll ask 3 questions, and you'll each have 3 minutes on that first section. The next section is even smaller. It's also 1 question for each of you, and you'll have 1 minute to respond, and your opponents will have a 30-second rebuttal. And then the meat of the forum, about an hour's worth, will be a series of questions, and you'll all be able to answer each one with 2 minutes apiece. Does that make sense?
On the timing, this is a little janky. I swear we looked for a Zoom fix, and there surprisingly isn't one. I will be keeping time, and when you have 20 seconds left, you'll see green. When it's time to stop, you'll see yellow and the stop sign. And as we put in the rules, I believe if people do go on well beyond their time, we'll let you finish your sentence or whatever, of course. But if you keep talking, we will mute you. So we'll keep the decorum here. Shall I pull names so we know the order?
Yeah.
Okay, I have each of your names here in this here cup, and we will randomly draw. We will start the first question with David Rabbit.
So that means, David, you'll be the first to give an opening statement.
Yes. Second up will be Kevin, and that leaves Blake in the third position. But as Tyler put in the instructions, we'll be rotating who goes first every time to keep it fair for all candidates. We know if somebody's talking first every time, that kind of get first grab at it. So it'll go David, Kevin, Blake, and then Kevin, Blake, David, and then Blake, David, Kevin, and so on and so forth from there throughout the event. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
Any burning questions?
Did Emily not have a red folder?
What's that?
Did Emily not have a red folder?
I really looked for one, David. You have no idea. I ripped this office apart. We always have red folders in here, but we must have used them on that city council forum with 200 candidates.
One reminder is, and you all are pros at this by now, so that's great with us and our timing, is when you're not speaking, I recommend just muting yourselves. Makes sense?
All right. So one other thing to note, when you guys, if you need to communicate with us for any reason, you can absolutely use the chat feature. Just make sure it's set to panelists, hosts and panelists, because if you set it to everybody, then everybody watching is going to see what you typed. So if you need to, clarify something or ask a question, I'll be monitoring the chat.
Great.
All right. We are 1 minute out. We like to do a timely start for our audience.
I'm just typing names in here, so I make sure to get everybody.
Okay. You ready, Tyler?
I am.
All right. Good luck, everybody. We're going to start now. Good evening, Petaluma. My name is Emily Sherrier. I am the publisher of our award-winning Petaluma Argus-Courier. And along with our friends at the Petaluma Area Chamber of Commerce, I'd like to welcome you to tonight's Supervisor Forum. I'll be passing it off to our moderator for this evening, Editor Tyler Sylvie. But before I do, just note that we'll be launching a poll at the beginning and a poll at the end of this event, so feel free to play along with us. And with that, I will pass it to Tyler.
Thank you so much, Emily. Hello, I'm Tyler Sylvie, editor of the Petaluma Argus-Courier. Oh, the poll's on my screen. With ballots going out today and voting starting this week, I'm pleased to welcome the 3 candidates for Sonoma County Board of Supervisors District 2 seat this evening for a forum on some key issues for South County voters. David Rabbit, the incumbent, is a 3-time chair of the Board of Supervisors, and he's seeking his 4th term. A former Petaluma City Council member, Supervisor Rabbit also chairs the Smart Train Board of Directors and serves on the Board of Directors for the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and the Sonoma County Transportation Authority. Blake Cooper is a Petaluma Planning Commissioner, a UC Santa Cruz alum, and a former staffer for U.S. Representative Jared Huffman, where he helped with wildfire recovery processes, among other duties. Blake works for the California State Senate, and along with his role on Petaluma's Planning Commission, he also has appointments to the city's Bicycle Advisory Committee and Transit Advisory Committee. Kevin Hyenga was born and raised in Petaluma before attending UC Santa Cruz and San Francisco State. A former professional news editor for Katie Couric, Diane Sawyer, and Barbara Walters, Kevin is seeking the 2nd District seat without the traditional campaign apparatus, including his decision to forego fundraising in this race. For a better introduction to each of our candidates, I'd like to turn it over to the candidates themselves, starting with Supervisor Rabbit, followed by Kevin, and then Blake. You'll each have 2 minutes for opening statements. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Emily, the Argus-Courier, and the Petaluma Area Chamber of Commerce for hosting this evening's candidate forum. So never in a million years did I ever think I would ever run for elected office, but here I am. I'm an architect by profession. My wife, Jane, is a research nurse in neuro-oncology at UCSF. 35 years ago, we moved to Petaluma to put down roots and raise a family. And because of our kids, I volunteered in the local school and then within the district. And like many of you, as my kids grew, I volunteered in youth sports. We lost our Little League fields when a shopping center was built, so I ran for the Petaluma City Council to represent families and to get more parks and playing fields for our youth. 2 years later, a Great Recession hit. The parks had to take a back seat to ensuring that city could keep our police and fire department staffed and paid. I was a pragmatist. I had business sense. I was encouraged to run for county supervisor. I did, and I won. Fortunately, as supervisor, I was able to deliver a matching grant fund to construct those ball fields. The new park called Petaluma Community Sports Fields, 3 much needed and much enjoyed multi-use fields. Working collaboratively, working strategically, and following through, the project became reality. That's how I got into politics, because of a passion for Sonoma County, not because I'm a professional politician or was looking for a job. I pride myself on getting things done. I'm proud of my record and accomplishments. Tonight, I'll give you specific solutions to problems, as I always have. I ask the viewing audience to pay attention for specifics tonight. I have a feeling what you'll hear from my opponents tonight is a lot of talk and very little detail. That is what you do when you have little to no experience. You attack, criticize, and complain. And as you all know, it's easier to complain than to do, especially in politics. My world is about getting things done, delivering projects professionally, or delivering policies and projects that benefit the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Rabbit. Kevin, the floor is yours.
Thank you all for hosting this forum. Hello, I'm Kevin Hyenga, and I want to work for you. I'm not a career politician. This is my first time as candidate. My experience working in the news with Katie Couric, Diane Sawyer, and Barbara Walters made me a good listener and problem solver. It also made me want to do good for my hometown of Petaluma and Sonoma County. One of the greatest problems in Sonoma County is the institutional racism that is occurring in the county. We need a supervisor with conviction to fight racism, as I have done in the past and still am doing. I am the only candidate that has sacrificed to fight racism. We need to protect our natural agricultural lands, secure our water supply, expand our regional parks, bikes, and pedestrian trails throughout Sonoma County, ensure growth in our county accounts for climate change, droughts, and infrastructure, invest in large-scale solar projects, increase incentives for residential and commercial solar installations, increase our electric vehicle charging network, increase fire surface effectiveness in unincorporated areas, and help the homeless. We have resources to provide real and innovative solutions to the homeless crisis. Also, I'm the only candidate opposing taxing and adding fees to residential wells. We need members of the board with the courage to listen to Sonoma County folks, to have the courage to do what's best for Sonoma County. It's time for a change. It's time to elect courageous, hardworking folk with experience and hardship as supervisor. It's time to take money out of politics. I'm not accepting any contributions, and I'm not spending thousands of dollars to buy your vote. Excuse me. Career politicians with vested interests in their issues are never the best people to fight for the workers, racism, or in the environment. I have no financial interest in becoming supervisor. If you care as passionately as I do about moving Sonoma County forward, then vote for me, Kevin Hyenga, for a better future. Together, we can build a better Sonoma County and keep it a beautiful place to live, work, and raise a family. I'm asking for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Blake?
Thank you very much. I was raised in South Sonoma County. I grew up at the edge of Petaluma next to Mr. Hash's farm. My parents came here for Petaluma's natural beauty because it was affordable and because they saw the opportunity to build a life here. That same opportunity is slipping out of reach for far too many of us. We're facing challenges in housing affordability, leading to the second biggest rent increase in Bay Area last year alone. A skyrocketing cost of living driven by massive PG&E bill hikes, increasing traffic made worse by a broken public transit system, the threat of wildfires, floods, and the continuing pandemic. These are problems that affect everyone in our county, not just District 2. In District 2, we've got a supervisor who wants to reactively solve every problem at the county level and leave our cities to fend for themselves. He's had 12 years to make progress on the real problems affecting everyone here. But over the last 4 years, things have gotten much worse. We're running up against the limits of what one supervisor and the county can do alone. We're in a time where the solutions to these problems lie in our cities. So we need regional leader to pool resources and get people working together. We need a county government and our cities to move together to solve the challenges of our next decade. Elected officials in our cities understand that I will be a willing partner who will work as hard as the job demands and will work with them rather than blaming them if we disagree. I've spent my life working with leaders at the local, state, and federal level in service of the people of Sonoma County. That's why I'm endorsed by every mayor in this county, by the majority of every mayor of this county who has chosen to make an endorsement. It's why I've been endorsed by every mayor in this district and why I'm endorsed by the majority of city council members in this district and organizations representing thousands of workers throughout Sonoma County, as well as trusted institutions like the Sierra Club and the Sonoma County Democratic Party. My name is Blake Cooper. I'm running for supervisor so you and your family can build a life here.
Thank you all so much for those opening statements. Tonight's forum will be broken into 3 sections: big picture questions, candidate-specific questions, and direct questions. Each section features a slightly different time limit for answers. We will rotate speaking order throughout based on a drawing we did ahead of the forum. And during candidate-specific questions, opponents will have the opportunity for short rebuttals. You will see signals to candidates throughout the debate, warning of time limits, and if necessary, we may mute candidates who continue to exceed the stated limits. As moderator, I may ask questions to clarify answers or give candidates opportunities to more directly answer the questions posed. But during this forum, we will not engage in live fact-checking. We'll start with the big picture questions, where candidates will be given 3 minutes apiece to weigh in on 3 major thematic questions for our region. First, Sonoma County is just now emerging from 2+ years of combating the coronavirus pandemic. People have lost their businesses, their jobs, and their loved ones. What has your experience been during the pandemic, and where should the county change, or where could it have changed course in terms of the response? Kevin, we'll start with you. Then it'll be Blake, followed by David.
Okay. My experience is my work. Do you hear me? Okay. My experience in the pandemic has been harsh. I've been severely impacted by the pandemic. The last 2 years literally was the least money I've ever made in my life. The impact of our pandemic response should account for the downstream effects. Sonoma County has a growing crisis of income insecurity, homelessness, and mental health due to our pandemic response. Parents and children have felt the brunt of our policy response to COVID-19, and children always should have access to good quality in-person education and support their extracurricular activities so they can grow into healthy and productive adults. What has different is I think our response may have been a little too strict on the businesses because a lot of businesses did close down and a lot of incomes like me got hurt and the $1,400 didn't cut it. I would have fought the SB loan money that was the grant money that was given out because it should have been given out according to necessity. What it was changed into was how many employees you have. So restaurants that needed that constant revenue stream, those all fell down because they didn't have such a high, high employment employees, excuse me, a number of employees, while the bigger companies got a lot of money, and a lot of these big companies didn't need the money. I would definitely want to support the businesses a lot more. Other than that, not too much. It's really supporting the businesses. I think our mask policy have gone on way too long. I think we were in an endemic a lot sooner than what they're predicting to. I personally had COVID before the vaccines, and for me, I was fine. That's how I feel. So the difference is I would have supported the businesses a lot more. I would have fought the SB money so that they could actually have got money for the lower businesses. That's pretty much what I would have done. Sorry.
Thank you, Kevin. Next up is Blake, and let me know at any point if any of you need me to repeat the question.
Well, thank you very much, Tyler. I'll say on a personal level, the pandemic for my wife and I was quite difficult. We're renters in the middle of town, and a lot of our friends and family members are also renters. A lot of them were having kids. A lot of them had jobs that could not work from home. A lot of them found out the hard way just how insecure their finances were. I spent a lot of time with old cases I had from when I worked with Congressman Huffman with folks who didn't know what to do because they didn't have access to county support as they did before. I spent a lot of time on the phone with friends who were small business owners who were trying to figure out what funds were coming from the state in order to help support their business throughout the pandemic so they could keep their employees on. And a lot of my friends who are parents and a lot of my friends who are trying to just make it through the day were especially frustrated because they were also dealing with conflicting reports about what to do with their kids and how they would teach at home. And one major issue that showed up right away was when we did get vaccines, when they did become available, trying to make sure that our teachers could get vaccinations. And it drove a lot of my friends nuts to try and be able to see why their teachers weren't getting the vaccines they needed so they could start dropping their kids off at school again, so they could start socializing safely again. And when digging into that, we found one problem, which is we were constantly trying to figure out how we could get help from the county, and our supervisor wasn't really willing to provide that help. And that came up especially with our school board president, who when asking for it was more or less told to break out an erector set. This is just a ridiculous situation to be in. And we found this coming up time and time again when trying to ask for help. Now, I was also helping with emergency communications with the state at this time. I knew what grants were being provided. I had to help a lot of my friends get access to those grants, help a lot of people who I knew or who were in struggling businesses get access to those grants. And what was very frustrating was watching as the county took far too long to provide that help. You can disagree about whether or not the response to the pandemic went too long. You can have that debate or not. But the reality is we had resources that just weren't being allocated coming from higher levels of government that could have helped people before they had to actually lay people off or close their business or get help with their rent. And especially around rental assistance, there's a total breakdown in communication. A lot of what we saw and a lot of what my friends saw was just this slow response where we were talking about solutions well after people had been evicted, lost their businesses, or lost their jobs. So my perspective on the pandemic is that we were effectively left alone in this district. Thank you.
David.
I think the last 2+ years in pandemics have been incredibly hard on everyone, no doubt. And I think about a friend of mine who lost her husband, who had pre-existing conditions and died early on in the pandemic. So, we made the best decisions with the information made available. For me personally, I worked like a dog through the pandemic, but here I was safe at home, working remotely, around the clock on Zoom meetings, honestly. I was the business liaison for the county, working with faith-based organizations, nonprofits, restaurants, hospitality, ag sector, the retail sector, manufacturing. At the very beginning, talking about what was an essential business, what wasn't, who could open, who couldn't, interpreting what was coming from the state. And quite frankly, the state was a little slow in getting information out. The governor made pronouncements every Tuesday at noon and with no advance warning. So it was really difficult. It was difficult for everyone. And I think that we all know that. I do think that through that organizational structure that we had at the county, We then used the Economic Development Board to be the clearinghouse for information. Who was essential? What activities did you need to take place in your business to operate? Including when we first started talking about masking, social distancing, sanitizing, all that came into a clearinghouse place where businesses then could go and look. And so I think that was a very successful initial piece going forward. Certainly setting up a separate COVID division within the Department of Public Health, making sure that we reached out far and wide, making sure that we were reaching out in languages that people and connecting people where they were. And those numbers were always going to change because the first responders are a certain demographic in this county, like it or not. And I will say through all that, my wife worked every day. My son, a firefighter, worked every day. His fiance, a nurse, actually worked in a COVID ward every day. My daughter, a chemist at a hospital, worked every day as well. Those were difficult times for sure. And I think at the end of the day, hindsight in pandemics is a wonderful thing to look back at. It's unprecedented. No one knew it was around the corner. We weren't quite sure. We learned and adapted as we went. And what was amazing to me is on the medical side of the world, they know more today than they knew yesterday. They'll know more tomorrow than they know today. They continually make that increasing their knowledge base to know how to attack the virus, to know what medicines work and what treatments do work and what treatments don't work. I think it's all the rest of us that need to kind of figure this out globally, including at the state, local, city, and federal level. And we do have an after action report going on right now to learn these things so that we can actually, and God forbid, something like this happens in the future, that we could actually do a good job. But to criticize a pandemic response in unprecedented times, you know, hindsight is wonderful.
Thank you, David. Blake, you'll have the first crack at our next question. The threat of climate change is existential. Has Sonoma County done a good job in addressing climate change, both its causes and impacts? And what more could the county do? David, you'll be next, and Kevin, you'll follow that.
I mean, the short answer is we've been trying, but we haven't gone nearly far enough at the county level. So over 64% of our greenhouse gas emissions produced in this county come from cars driving on the road. If we really want to get serious about tackling climate change, we're going to have to get serious about regional transportation that actually connects well and high density housing that focuses on transit corridors. That's why it's so important that we have a supervisor that is actually focused on communication at all levels of government when it comes to our transit opportunities. It's why it's important that we focus on city-centered development that actually allows for people to live near their transit hubs, to be able to have an opportunity to not take their car to work. This is also why it's important that the SMART train no longer be this idea, but actually be the backbone of our transit in this county, which will take a lot of arrangement and a lot of work. We need to have our bus system and shuttles actually connect to SMART and allow for opportunities to see transit hit high density populations, hit areas where we have people commuting to work, areas where people are commuting for better recreational activities. We need to have a fulfilled bicycle and bicycle network throughout our counties, and that connects well with our cities, and see real funding for it. And we need to see coordination when it comes to these structures so that Petaluma Transit, Santa Rosa Transit, County Transit, and SMART are actually working in tangent with each other. The other issue is we have RCPA, which is meant to be our preeminent focus on long-term climate planning in the county. Well, I've spoken with a lot of our council members and a lot of representatives on RCPA, and they can all tell you the same thing. It doesn't have any teeth. It needs a lot more focus. It needs regional planning, and it requires people with vision. And it requires that the county and cities are equal partners on these boards. Same with SRTA, same with a lot of our more regional entities that we have in this county. We need equal partnerships to pull this off. But outside of this, this is where our rural community really comes into place. We are seeing right now how the economics of the recent years have really made it harder for our dairies, for our small farms to really operate the way they did. There's no longer cheap feed from the Central Valley, and we're now in a place where people have to use less water, they have to have less access to feed, and they have to work much closer to a more organic certification. This is where the county could really be providing help, really providing the resources for these folks to make that transition less painfully. And what's important about this is you see with operations like Strauss, how there's a lot of opportunity to be gained to not only make money and keep their businesses thriving, but also reduce greenhouse gas emissions from our dairies, see better, healthier soils, and see a long-term protection of what makes this county special. But if we're really going to see climate change addressed in any of the timelines that we've talked about, it means we're gonna have to address housing density, we're gonna have to address our transit infrastructure, and we're gonna have to pay long-term attention to our drought, and not just assume that our groundwater is gonna be a reservoir beneath our feet, because we all know it won't be. And finally, I would just say, if we're going to do this, this is going to require a general plan that is a climate mitigation plan that actually works together with the efforts that our cities are undergoing right now. And it's something I'm very concerned we're not going to get with the current process. Thank you.
David.
Thank you very much. Actually, I was honored to represent the county and RCPA, the Regional Climate Protection Authority, at the Obama White House, receiving a Climate Champion Award on behalf of the RCPA. Really the first and only regional approach to addressing climate change here in Sonoma County. Not unusual that that the leadership of Sonoma County is so strong. We also were the first entity to have the Sonoma County Energy Independence Program. Came out after the 2008 recession in order to do energy efficiency within homes. And of course, I was on the board, and the single largest impact to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions in this county has been Sonoma Clean Power, by far. Also have the Sonoma County Energy Watch Program, energy efficiency and resources, primarily targeting municipalities, but elements for small businesses, nonprofits, and residential folks as well. We did a solar installation at Los Gulicos, 1.5 megawatts, the first total government campus on site to be 100% powered. And several years ago, the county fleet was #1 in the nation for government fleets for its EVs and its green fleet. So we have the Drive EV rebates, carbon-free water. Sonoma Water has been in the forefront of all things on the energy side. That's where Sonoma Clean Power was hatched, because it takes a lot of energy to push water around and sewer around, as we all know. Sonoma County Climate Adaptation Plan. Vital Lands Initiative, I think, is also another piece of our climate action here in Sonoma County. And even the county itself is fueled by fuels energy. So, the county has been in the forefront of many things on climate. There's more to do, obviously, as we move forward. And especially as this county has seen with floods and wildfires and this volatile weather pattern that we're in. Certainly drought, and I look forward to talking in depth about all the things that we've been working on with water. The aquifer beneath our feet is a reservoir, always has been a reservoir, and many people with wells do appreciate that fact. There is excess winter water that we can take from the Russian River and bring that down and get it into the aquifer to be pulled up in dry seasons. And that's actually something that's right now underway. Recycled water. I led the 3-county North Bay in acquiring $190 million in federal funds to get infrastructure for recycled water here in the North Bay as well. So there's a lot of good work going on. There's more challenges ahead. There's more work to do. Exactly why we need to have someone in the office who understands the full big picture of what is happening and the opportunities that exist.
Thank you, David. Kevin.
Hey, well, I'm a big fan of the Sonoma Clean Energy. We need to definitely invest in a lot more large solar scale projects. And we also need to, like he was talking about, increase our EV fleet with our government cars. We need to increase incentives of the residential and commercial and solar installations. And we also need to increase the fire service effectiveness in the unincorporated areas. These are the areas where these massive fires metastasize. And whatever the fire services need, CAL FIRE or whatever, we need to support that. Rabbit's talking about groundwater. First of all, in Petaluma, a lot of the residential wells are drying out because we're taking too much water. There's not enough water in the ground for us to make for all the growth that we are doing. We are really tapped out where we can get more water unless we start getting water from the ocean. We need to conserve where we can, convert our yards to low water use, beef up water recycling programs, which will help, and assess how much water we will need in the future so we're not overgrowing our supply of water, which is what we're doing right now, actually. Long-term forecasts show that we're going to have this drought situation going on. I was born and raised here. We used to get a lot of rain, in the January and February months, and then it would tape off like in the summer. Now we get this early winter rain, and then we just get sprinkling that's going down throughout the months. If you want to have all this growth, we do need another water supply. Desalination, unfortunately, has a lot of problems: cost, brine waste, energy, and taste. And I do still think we need to look into it, because just recycling water and just trying to conserve and all that stuff, we eventually still have to put more water into the system. Those are the things that I would look for. We can always improve, and I applaud the stuff that Sonoma County has done, but I would definitely look into improving a lot more with the transit system, electric cars, our water, and our fire services.
Thank you, Kevin. This is the first District 2 supervisor race since Black Lives Matter protests rocked the nation in the summer of 2020. Since that time, voters have approved greater oversight powers for the county's law enforcement watchdog agency, and individual cities, including right here in Petaluma, have moved to expand local police oversight. Do you support this push toward expanded law enforcement oversight? And what does good police oversight look like to you? David, can you start us off? Kevin will go next, followed by Blake.
Yeah, well, obviously I support police oversight since I was on the board when we put in ILERO, the Independent Office of Law Enforcement Review and Outreach. And it was really about three things, right? It was about making sure that there was a place where complaints could come and be heard and be investigated thoroughly. It was also about, within those complaints, is there something within the law enforcement policy that needs to be changed? And the third thing was to make sure that we did the outreach to really get out into the community. And I was also the champion on the board to make sure that that department, that brand new department, had the resources to function. And Carlene Navarro, recently now Judge Navarro, can tell you that I went to bat for her, and I got her additional 2 attorneys at a time when our budget wasn't really that flush. So obviously I support that. I'm sure we'll hear about Measure P. Measure P was a citizen initiative that was going to be put on, was not going to be put on, was going to be put on. Quite frankly, we were told by our attorneys that it had some issues. I made that public at the time and said we should probably figure out how to solve those issues before we put it on the ballot. That didn't happen. It went on the ballot. And where is Measure P today? It's basically in court, kind of right where they told us it would be. And there's a price to not listening to your attorneys. I don't think that means that any of us are less interested in transparency and accountability in law enforcement. I think that means that we just understand that there are things that you just can't talk about, but you actually have to implement. And you actually have to deal with case law, and you actually have to deal with the fact that the county is a general law county that has an elected sheriff and within the systems that you have. You can't throw punches and expect people to actually listen to you. You have to work collaboratively and going forward. I've always been able to do that. I've been the one to have that relationship with the sheriff because why? It benefits me and my constituents, most importantly. If I have to call and make sure that there's something, a squad car in a certain area of the south part of the county, I have that relationship where I can pick up the phone and that will happen. Those are important to me. Those are important to my constituents, and I know that. I believe if you live out in the unincorporated area, and we're lucky to live in a low crime area, we don't have a lot of law enforcement out on any given hour. We have just enough. But with mutual aid and whatnot, we are more than safe, and with a good professional work that all of those people in law enforcement do for us. So yes, I am always been in favor of overview, always been in favor, really emphasizing on if a citizen complaint comes through, and this is what happened with our previous director, the audits went undone. That statute of limitations passed, and that is unfair to someone who lodges a complaint to not have it be investigated.
David, if I could follow up, did you want to share a little bit more about what good police oversight looks like to you? Is that currently what we have, or do you have anything else to share on that front?
We have better police oversight than many, and we certainly, you see the cities now coming on board, but we've been doing this and learning along the way for the last 3 years. So I do believe that we are out in front. It's about having a place for people to go when they feel aggrieved, and it's about having that be taken seriously, thoroughly investigated, and consequences coming from that, if it's substantiated. And of course, that's key, is to make sure that you just follow through on that. We have that mechanism in place in the county. Right now, a lot of cities in this county don't have that in place. I'm glad to see that Petaluma is taking that up. I think it's important. And if you talk to law enforcement, they think it's important too. It's an incredibly tough job where you're second guessed every minute. You're dealing with people on the worst day of their lives. And all the while you're trying to make sure that you de-escalate things and make sure people are safe, both with who you're dealing with and the crime victims that are out there.
Thank you for that clarification, David. And Kevin, you're up next. Do you need me to repeat the question?
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, so the question is, do you support this localized push toward expanded law enforcement oversight? And what does good police oversight look like to you?
Okay, yeah, I do support the oversight. I support the independent office law enforcement, the IORC oversight. I would want good oversight is to have a place where these complaints can be heard, and that they're not only heard, that they are investigated. It seems a lot of complaints go through and they're just not investigated, or someone was taking an importance on it and it's not investigation. Outreach programs. Actually was part of somewhat of an outreach program when I was in high school, when I helped sponsor the dance with the McDowell Drug Task Force, which were retired police officers trying to do outreach with the young folks. What I really see that would be a more important thing is diversity in our police force. So far, our police force and sheriff is basically white. I mean, the vast majority of the folks are white folks. We don't have enough diversity in our police force. And that's something that I would definitely want to work towards. It does take a lot of,
we appear to have an issue with Kevin. I want to keep us moving along, and Blake, wonder if you can step in real quick and take your turn with this question.
I have no problem with that, Tyler. I strongly support local efforts that have been taken to have real police oversight in Petaluma. I support accountability when it comes to law enforcement, and also with all government employees, because at the end of the day, they are also government employees earning a paycheck with taxpayer dollars, and it should be expected. I also strongly support IOLERO, which, if we work closely between the county and our cities, we could see actual contracting with IOLERO if we expand it out, so that cities that form an accountability board don't have to hire redundant staff when it comes to the experts required to make this work. But I also want to call out attention to one other thing that one of my opponents said. It is laughable to say that the current supervisor is in any way supportive of IOLERO or Measure P. The county may have passed IOLERO, but the supervisor talked against it the whole way through. The reason Measure P went on the ballot was to protect it, statutorily speaking, as a budget item, because the current supervisor kept threatening it. Outside of that, it is very difficult to see the current supervisor talk about support for IOLERO when he's accepted the endorsement and maximum contribution for the Deputy Sheriff's Association, which is the very same entity that has sued IOLERO in court through the PERB disagreement that's currently going on. You cannot have a supervisor who supports oversight, who at the same time is supported by the very entities who want to take it away. And you can say that this is an issue about the legality of Measure P, but it went well through the entire process and it passed overwhelmingly in this county. We need a supervisor who doesn't say, "I told you so," but a supervisor who actually worked to make sure that we have the accountability, that the voters of Sonoma County, and overwhelmingly the voters of South County, expect to see. And also, I would like to point out, I would hope that a sheriff and a supervisor would have a good relationship regardless of who's in the role, because that's their job. I would hope that anyone calling with regards to needing help from the sheriff's department could expect to get that help, because that's the sheriff's department's job. None of this is unique to this current supervisor. And for the current supervisor to talk as though he has helped move this along is emphatically counter to everything we've seen thus far. We need a supervisor who actually supports IOLERO, supports accountability, and wants to see that at the city level and the county level, we have a level of accountability that allows for a process that not only people who are concerned with police can trust, but those who are also in law enforcement can trust to be fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Blake. Kevin, I want to go back to you.
Yeah, I don't know where it cut off, to tell you the truth. But I pretty much said what I said. You know, I don't think the current supervisor as well, you know, is being supporting on this. He's saying he is right now, but that's not what his record really shows. I'm not too sure where I cut off, so I'll let it go. I'm all right with the problem with my Wi-Fi. We can move forward. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Kevin. We'll now move on to candidate-specific questions. Candidates will have 1 minute to respond to their specific question, and the other two candidates will have 30 seconds apiece for any rebuttals. We can call this the rapid-fire section. We're going to start with you, Kevin. Kevin, you're not raising any money or otherwise running a traditional campaign. Why get into the race if you're not going to aggressively pursue the District 2 seat?
Well, I am aggressively pursuing the District 2 seat. Just because you're raising money doesn't mean you're doing, you know, any good. I did go back and forth with this. I was going to do the raising money, but I really was passionate about taking money out of politics. When you start raising the money, because I was part of campaigns and stuff, not my own, but other people's campaigns, that's your whole focus. Your focus is on donations, getting money, making speeches to get donations, spending money, instead of doing what the real issues of the people are. And that's why I got at the Press Democrat editorial board. I had a guy on my right laughing at me every time I would be talking about this. And I was laughing with him because, you know, it is somewhat laughable. I had a lot more obstacles than I thought. The Sonoma County Democratic Party did not invite me and did closed doors by picking Blake. There were no in-person things that I would normally have had. Everything's all this Zoom form. So I'll admit I had more obstacles than I thought I would.
Thank you, Kevin. Do you have a rebuttal, Blake? 30 seconds.
I do. The Sonoma County Democratic Party actually put out the application to all the declared candidates that they knew of when they went through the process. Kevin wasn't a declared candidate yet, as far as I know. The application or the request for application went to both David and I, as far as I know. Thank you.
David?
I never got the application, just to let you know. And I was a candidate Kevin, just as much as you guys were.
I want to move on to David.
Just rounding out this particular one, Tyler.
Yeah. Any rebuttal to Kevin's place in the race or his campaign?
No, I will also say that I never had an interview with. I'm a Democrat. I've been a Democrat my entire life. I've won 4 elections, and I never had an interview for this endorsement. I called the Democratic Party to straighten that out after talking to Congressman Thompson, who informed me that the deadline has passed, and I never got a return call. It's unfortunate. You know, it's unfortunate, but I'm not surprised.
I want to agree with you. I did the same thing, and I got no response as well.
Thank you, David. Up next, Blake. You have less than 2 years experience on Petaluma's Planning Commission and no experience in elected office to date. Without that experience, how do you expect to effectively serve District 2 voters?
Well, I've worked as a public servant for most of my adult life. I worked at the local level, I've worked in budgeting. I worked with Sonoma County Conservation Action when it came to engaging the county, trying to get it to move further when it came to density housing, transit-oriented development, access to parks. I worked for Congressman Huffman on a variety of issues, especially when it came to the recovery process, especially when it came to veterans in our district. And at the state, as a legislative aide in housing and wildfire recovery, I've seen how other counties are working with their cities, working with their rural communities, and frankly, getting a lot more for the effort that they're employing. Most of my life has been focused on making sure that people actually get the help that they need. Now, it's true, I've not been a council member, but the current supervisor had only served at the city council for 2 years, had no other government experience, had, I believe, an architecture firm, and has spent the last 12 years in that role. And we haven't gotten what we need for it. And that's why I feel firmly confident in being able to take on this role.
Thanks, Blake. David, your rebuttal? 30 seconds.
I served 4 years. I served my entire term on the city council, and I would tell you it's invaluable. It's invaluable as you're on the board of supervisors to have that city experience. It's invaluable to know how the county functions, how the cities functions, and where you can actually cross-pollinate. You know, it's just, you know, and I am a small business owner. I'm the only one with that experience. I'm the only one who's actually signed the front of a check as opposed to just the back. My daughter worked for Congressman Thompson when she was, I believe, my opponent's age. Now she's working as in communications for the United Nations Foundation. You know, I understand what it takes going forward. I understand what the job entails. I've been doing it. And, you know, you do need the experience, whether you like it or not.
Thank you, David. Kevin, any rebuttal? 30 seconds.
Well, I can't rebuttal to no experience since I probably have the least of experiences here. But just having experience doesn't mean you're going to be doing good. I mean, look at the transit system. Look at what's going on with housing and infrastructure. Just because you have experience doesn't mean you're doing it. What we really need to do is elect an outsider to tackle this institutional racism problem. Only an outsider can actually do it. Both Rabbit and Blake have friends in the Sonoma County. Most issues, it takes 3 out of 5 to make a decision. But for institutional racism, one supervisor can make an immense difference.
Thank you, Kevin. David, the saga of a second SMART station in Petaluma is as long as it is complicated. As chair of the SMART Board of Directors, do you see a path forward for delivering another station for this community?
Yeah, I do. And, you know, and ideally it would be at Corona and McDowell. There was another site at one particular time over on Old Redwood, which one could argue was actually more convenient in many ways in terms of the traffic flows and the ability to have parking at that location. But, you know, the city said no, they want to keep it within the city limits at Corona and McDowell. One of the now city council members, this is the saga of Sonoma County, one of the now city council members was involved in a lawsuit that stopped that from going forward. SMART, you know, along the way had to make decisions that were tough before I got there to pare back the development, and the Petaluma station was one of those that got cut. We could have that station today if the city of Petaluma would approve the Corona station coupled with the downtown station going forward. That was 26.5% total affordable housing, but that was denied. That also would have delivered a SMART station over at Corona and McDowell.
Congratulations for wrapping up SMART in 1 minute, a second SMART station. I want to go to Kevin, your thoughts on this question.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, I went on to the SMART team.
The question for David was about whether he saw a path forward for delivering another station, a second station in Petaluma.
Okay, no, I agree with him. I think we definitely need more stations, and probably need a station in Pengrove as well. No, I have no rebuttal on that. I'm going to have to do an agreement with that. Sorry.
Okay,
yeah.
Blake?
All I'll just say is, here we go again, blaming the cities. The issue with the Danco project was that it would have created segregated affordable housing that would have been miles away from any shopping, from any grocery store or access to services. The city actually asked David for help when dealing with some of these negotiations early on, and he wouldn't put himself in a position to help our cities. It's why I'm endorsed by so many local leaders in this process. Thank you.
Thank you all for engaging with those questions. And now we'll transition to our final section, which is a series of questions on some key ongoing issues in the county and within District 2 specifically. We're seeking answers from all 3 candidates on these questions, and each of the candidates will have 2 minutes to answer. We'll start with a very local question. Have you talked with stakeholders on either side of the Sonoma-Marin Fairgrounds discussion? And what uses would you like to see for the 55-acre property in central Petaluma? Blake, we'll start with you, followed by David and then Kevin.
So I have spoken with stakeholders on either side of the issue, in part because while a supervisor has no direct role in this process, I do want to be prepared once they finally move forward with what it is the city wants to do. I've spoken with friends of the fairgrounds, of the folks who saved the fairgrounds. I've also spoken to people at the raceway, as well as other lessees, and I've spoken with the city and many elected officials, some of whom are my endorsers. And what I have found in the discussion is that there are quite a few people who really want to get to a shared perspective, but have had a bad start in terms of the communication that has undergone through this process. What I would like to see, just in a nutshell, and mind you, I'm not important here. What's important here is what the city and the Fair Board actually come to as an end conclusion. What I'd like to see, though, is that we protect the actual area where the fair is. We protect it not only because it's vitally important to the agricultural community, but also because we could really expand the emergency response services that are already there. I'd like to see us not only protect the raceway, but see it get the resources it needs to move to all electric racing. And I've spoken to a lot of folks there, as I've gone many times this season alone, and a lot of them are willing to do that. They're interested in moving forward. They're interested in dealing with the noise. It's also not a site that could very easily be developed because of the years and years and years of chemicals and toxins that have poured into it. So it's important that we consider it's best to invest in what we have there. Beyond the rest of it, that is where I really want to see public engagement move forward. There are a lot of strong feelings when it comes to the rural community side for the rest of the fairgrounds. There's a lot of strong feelings in the city. As supervisor, I want to work with the outcome, but I vitally want to protect those two core elements of the existing fairgrounds because they're important to our larger rural community and they're important to a lot of folks in our cities. Thank you.
Thank you, Blake. David?
And I too, I've spoken to Sonoma Marin Fair Board members and city council members, and actually just last week had a very long discussion with the city manager of Petaluma about the fairgrounds. You know, when I was on the city council, we spent a Saturday doing a charrette with a outside urban designer. It was an ad hoc committee of myself and two others. Because even then, the idea that the fairgrounds can be consolidated towards one side or the other of the property was under discussion. It's a shame that the lease negotiations have been stalled for as long as they have because they need surety in order to make investments on the property, and that's been held up. I think part of it too is when in negotiations is understanding what the city wants, what the fair wants, and finding that middle ground. I'm not sure what the city wants. Do they want more money from the property? Do they want a revenue stream? Do they want an opportunity to build housing? Or do they want an opportunity to put a new city hall, police, fire station? I think some of those things, perhaps not the housing, could work within the scheme. But I think you have to actually sit down and negotiate by throwing what it is you want out on the table and then going back and forth and reaching agreement. I do think, you know, I support the fair. I support its agricultural roots here in Sonoma County. I have never been to the races, but I love hearing the races from my home in the evening. It reminds me that you live in Petaluma, the unique community that it is. And I think that's actually a good thing. Again, the fair needs help to get itself, its future secured. It gets its future secured by getting a longer term lease. The city needs to know what it wants to do with what it is that they're trying to achieve through that lease. I'm more than willing to help them, and I think I can.
Thank you, David. Kevin.
Okay, I have not spoken to stakeholders. I don't have the access really to get to all these people, but I've spoken to people about saving the fairgrounds and what they want. I want to keep the fairgrounds as it is. I don't want any housing or even consider of housing in the fairground property. There is talk about maybe putting more of a park at the front end, which is what I would support that. But we definitely need to work on this long-term lease because it has been going on for a long time. I definitely want to support keeping the fairgrounds. It's good for our rural community. It's good for our community at large. And it's also like, it would be helpful for, you know, place for our fire services when we have those, you know, big fires that are going on. I'm all for keeping it. And don't know what more I can say about that. I do not want it to be developed. That's the one big thing I want to say. I want no development there. I was born and raised next to the racetracks. I listen to it every night, you know, whenever they do the races. I enjoy it. I enjoy the community. I think we should have more festivals, you know, and more, but that we need the lease to be, you know, to be completed. But other than that, yeah, I don't want any development on Fairgrounds, period.
Thank you, Kevin. And I'll share a bit of praise to each of you for going back and forth. We've had 3 minutes, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 30 seconds, and you're all doing great with time. So thank you so much for playing along. On to our next question. Sonoma County, like much of California, is locked in an ongoing housing crisis. What is the county's role in addressing that crisis? And what ideas do you have for easing the housing crunch? We'll go David, Kevin, and then Blake.
You know, first off, as an architect, someone who's been in this business for as long as I have, my family in development, in housing development, I believe I have the subject matter expertise to understand the issues that are at play. It is, we have 9 incorporated cities in Sonoma County. We tax ourselves a quarter cent for our open space. We all want urban growth, urban-centered growth. We have urban growth boundaries because of that. We have green belts. It has to, all the growth needs to occur within the incorporated cities, the vast majority of that growth. At the end of the day, it's not a secret. It's the 3 Ps. It's production. And what has the county done on production? We have the most liberal and generous accessory dwelling unit ordinance there is. I think ours is 1,200 square feet. The city is about 750 square feet. That's fine. There's a city it's a little different. We have the junior accessory dwelling unit. You actually can get an accessory dwelling unit over the counter with plans at the County of Sonoma right now. You also have lower development impact fees, really a product of Prop 13 as a way for local government to pick up cash once Prop 13 came in. But that really can either encourage or stifle development. By right approvals, we're seeing that coming out of Sacramento, the transit-oriented design. Really talking about inclusionary, and my opponent mentioned that there wasn't inclusionary housing downtown at the Hines site, and you know why it didn't get built? Because it didn't pencil out. My family builds inclusionary housing in San Francisco, and you know how it gets paid is for the other units in the building to subsidize those. That's just the reality. There are, you know, I have a program in place on this budget cycle for workforce proximity program, or first-time homeowner down payment assistance like they have over in Napa County. I think that can be very beneficial here to really open up the market. And we have, what, 3 housing projects, including mid-pen housing about to break ground in Petaluma Boulevard North and affordable housing development.
Thank you, David. Kevin. Welcome back.
Just saying, sorry about that. I have a bunch of kittens that just escaped, so I had to put them back. I'm probably one guy who's probably going to be pushing against a lot of the housing. First of all, any development needs to be infill. We're not going to be developing it in the unincorporated areas. It all has to be within the city limits. But developing these housing, we need to consider about the neighbors who are already there. A lot of the stuff that he was saying that was being canceled, you know, or that was not being penciled out and all that stuff, was plans that were just not inclusive for the neighborhood. They weren't including parking for their folks. We're not telling developers to build out more of our infrastructure, like the one on D Street, like they wanted to do the infill development there, but there was no real good D Street plan. There was no real good traffic plan, and there was no real good parking. And those issues need to be addressed when you're doing the housing. Pengrove is getting inundated with all the traffic, with all the housing that's going on. So to solve it, we really need to work on the rents that people are paying right now. We need to work on rental assistance. We need to work on the low income folks. Too many people are spouting, you know, building low income housing, which end up to be way too expensive for low income families. We need to find what low income is before we start building stuff that really is not affordable for the people that we say it's going to be affordable for. But I would be the one probably pushing back between all the different candidates on the growth man. I understand we have a housing crisis, but we also have a water crisis, and we also have an infrastructure crisis, and we also have a land use crisis. So unfortunately, I'm probably the one that's going to be saying, pushing back and making sure these plans are not detrimentally infecting the neighborhoods that they're building in too.
Thank you, Kevin. Blake.
Thank you very much, Tyler. I mean, just to get started, let's talk about affordable housing development at the county right now. So we do not have a county housing development department that's actually working at a functional rate. We have a lot of nonprofits filling those roles. I love Gen Edge housing to death, but it shouldn't be filling a county role when it comes to coordinating technical assistance and state and federal grants for funding of affordable housing in cities. Most cities have this. Most counties in the Bay Area have this at a functional rate. We have not. In fact, we've seen a bit brain drain over the last 10 years of our best employees going to the state because of functional issues we've had at the county. Now, if you're going to talk about development, you also have to talk about the permitting department. Our county's permitting department has been a problem for a good 5 to 10 years now. I have knocked on doors in rural parts of this county all over the 2nd District. I've walked through our cities, and the one thing that comes up over and over again is the county permitting department, how it's a problem for people trying to build homes, and it's a problem for people trying to get businesses off the ground. It's backlogged, and that sure does feel like something a supervisor would have a great deal of oversight over. I also would like to see us have a real just cause eviction policy that doesn't just assume that because the pandemic seems to be ramping down, that people have recovered economically. Most of us haven't. Most of us need that kind of help. Now let's talk about the county general plan. We've kicked that can down the road for over 5 years, and now we're just getting to it while skipping most of the community engagement we should have had in the first place. If we're going to have real development move forward for housing in this county, and especially with our cities, we need a county general plan that has updated zoning code, updated zoning map, and that works together with the general plans that our cities are engaging, not at cross purposes, and with a climate mitigation plan. And finally, if you're going to talk about development in this community, I just want to say, I work at the California State Senate. I work in housing and wildfire recovery policy. I'm a planning commissioner here. I actually understand how development works today, not 12 years ago. Thank you.
In the past 2 years, Sonoma County has undergone a tectonic shift in its approach to homelessness, with the county and its cities cozying up to tiny homes and repurposed hotels to house our most vulnerable neighbors. But much of this spending has been made possible by coronavirus relief funding. Do you agree with the region's approach to date, and do you feel it's sustainable? Kevin, you're first, followed by Blake, and then David.
Yes, I agree with your approach, and it can be sustainable. I mean, homelessness is a growing crisis in Sonoma County. We do have the resource to provide real innovative solutions. I like the Petaluma People's Village that's going on right now, and I think we should be building more of that. Up in Sacramento, they're actually doing campsites, near shelters and stuff like that, to allow people to have the space to go and camp. Because right now we have campsites everywhere. You can go down Lynch Creek, you go down by the Petaluma River next to the transit station. They're all kind of spread out, and they're all kind of hard to keep in touch with. I definitely would want more campsites or more things like the Petaluma People's Village, the little shelters happen. So I agree with it. I think it can be sustainable, but we definitely have to start funding it beyond the COVID relief fund stuff.
Blake?
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, so just talking about the county and cities doing more tiny homes, repurposed hotels during the pandemic. Much of the spending, though, has been made possible by coronavirus relief funding. The question is, do you agree with the approach, and do you think it's sustainable?
I mean, I agree with the approach as it stands, as long as that funding is still available. So I absolutely think our cities should partner more with the county when it comes to Project Home Key, when it comes to tiny villages. We just got one opened up in Petaluma. My problem, though, is that when the city tried to partner with the county, they had to drag the county in to be a strong partner in the process. When it comes to Project Home Key, when Runner Park wanted help getting that off the ground, they couldn't speak to their supervisor, which includes the current incumbent, so they had to work around him. If we're going to follow this approach, we need a supervisor who's going to be proactive about those partnerships and about those funding opportunities. But in the long term, should things like Project Home Key fall flat, should our current pandemic funding start to fall flat, that is why it is so incredibly important that we get the staffing we need to look for braided funding for these kind of joint projects, especially when it comes to homelessness, affordable housing, and green energy funds. There's a lot that's been put out in the last 2 to 3 years, a lot of opportunities for us to focus on moving forward, especially at the federal level. And we miss those opportunities quite frequently. And that's where I'd want to go long-term, so we don't have to assume that we're just going to have the pandemic funds going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Blake. David, the last word on this one.
Yeah, it's just a whole bunch of accusations out there that are just factually inaccurate, I might add. I agree with the approach on what we're taking right now on the homeless side with the COVID dollars, and it needs to be supplanted with other long-term dollars going forward. The state and the governor's office has done a pretty good job in backfilling that, and the county has made a concerted effort and added our own general funds to that. This issue has started at the county prior to the coming down into the South County. We had the Vannucci issue up at the Joe Rodota Trail. We had now we have Martin v. Boise, and certainly at Petaluma has the Steamer Landing has a temporary restraining order there. You know, Los Galicos with 60 units, that's been successful. It was the first of the kind in the county. Project Home Key, and certainly what we've done at People's Village at Mary Isaac Center, a $750,000 county contribution, and really making that work. Home Key for at the America's Best Value Inn, northeast side of town, 60 rooms, $1.5 million county contribution. The local match was split. There is nothing but cooperation and collaboration with the city and the county and Dave Kiff. I might say that no one from Roanoke Park had contacted me, but I know that Roanoke Park had contacted our staff who had discussed the issue with me, of which I supported. So the politics involved here is just really interesting. The county has been nothing but supportive to our cities on following these paths. You know, in Cotati, we have Arthur Court, a very successful 7-unit transitional housing project as well. And what you really have at the county, because you have different HUD entitlement cities, including Petaluma, you only have 2 housing authorities in the county, one in Sonoma County, one in Santa Rosa. But the vouchers, the HUD vouchers, come out of the housing authority within the county of Sonoma. And we have been more than generous with the South County. I make sure of that, both project-based and market-based.
Thank you. I'd like to keep the same order for a quick follow-up. So it'll be Kevin, Blake, and David. The Press Democrat reported over the weekend about the Palms in South Santa Rosa, showing residents there living in squalor. How does that happen? And does that give you pause about the program of converting hotels? Kevin.
It doesn't give me pause about converting hotels. We should definitely do that. I'm not aware about the Palms, you know, what they're living in squalor. I haven't read that report yet, or, you know, from the Press Democrat. So I don't know how much I can, talk about it. Other than that, I do support helping the homeless. If there's a squalor situation there, it means we definitely need more like either tiny homes and campsites. I saw something in your chat saying that the tiny homes are not being utilized. That's not true, because I drive the people at the homeless to their stuff, you know, to their houses and to the store or to their job interviews. That's what I do. Other than that, I can't say much more because I actually don't know the specifics of what you're asking.
Thank you, Kevin. Blake, any thoughts?
Well, it doesn't give me pause for the actual program itself and making sure that we have these conversions. What it does point out is a longstanding issue we've had at the county which has to do with oversight. We don't, when it comes to a lot of our service programs, we don't have standardized procurement. We don't have really a standardized process for how we oversee some of these services. And it's not to put that on the providers. It also calls into attention what resources the county should be providing some of those resource providers to actually be able to provide some of the needed check-ins and processes for oversight on their own, as well as with the county. I think this is a prime example of how we can't just have services and say that we've done it as a county. We actually have to go with them and follow through to see what the quality of care really looks like. And that is something that I think is going to be very important going forward, as we have a lot more people who are in need, whether it comes to housing, but also our broader social services network.
David, your perspective.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And no, we shouldn't pause about converting hotels, but what we did do at the county is that we now make sure that there's a government entity that owns and operates that hotel, as opposed to what happened at the Palms Inn as a private sector. Palms Inn was an early pilot program, quite frankly, and everyone was excited when it happened, including Congressman Mike Thompson, because a lot of the vouchers used there are VASH vouchers for veterans who are homeless. Part of this has to do with the Housing First policy overall, which is a national policy, which says that first thing, get a roof over someone's head. Second thing is to really have the wraparound services, the addiction services, those types of things. You're always going to be kind of battling that push and pull. But I think, as COTS has always said, you know, it's really one person at a time, making sure that you're being successful, keeping that person safely housed, making sure that they have a place to stay. You know, we do have a standardized procurement at the county. This is a voucher. The county's role in this is strictly on the voucher side of things. And the voucher at the Fed level, at the HUD level, has certain requirements for inspections and certain limitations on inspections. We've been talking about what to do in that regard to ramp that up, because you're right, it should be ramped up in this regard, but so should the property manager and the private property owner make sure that they maintain that property going forward. But it shouldn't mean that we stop. We have an opportunity with the two existing facilities that we own, and the third that we actually just purchased out of the Russian River, to continue this program and really make a huge dent in getting people housed who are now without shelter.
Thank you, David. We're entering year 3 of drought, and in Petaluma, water restrictions haven't changed since September. Has the county and Sonoma Water done a good job of managing water resources during the drought? And what, if anything, could be improved? We'll start with Blake, then David, and Kevin.
Well, right at the start, I would say we started at a county talking about the drought a good year or more into the actual count that the actual drought that the county was already going through. There were several town halls at the start where, I'm sorry, groundwater was framed as a reservoir. Anybody who's actually spent time working with folks who actually are experts on the subject will tell you it's a battery, not a power supply. You have to keep in mind your uses. You can't dry out an aquifer. And if you do, you've really got to be worried about what your injection sites look like. And we're still trying to work out how well we can handle injection wells. I don't think that our groundwater has been managed nearly well enough. And I also don't think that our water has been managed nearly well enough when we're looking at the drought that's oncoming. Every regional assessment has shown that we've got about 20 years of more drought than not. And in the periods of time where we do get rain, it'll be quick and fast flowing, which is problematic because it makes it that much harder for us to be able to actually recharge our aquifers, which is so critical for so much of the second district. Those same assessments all share that after the next 20 years, it looks like things really just go off the ledge. So we've got 20 years to really start preparing with long-term storage, preparing for better conservation water use, and then looking at how we can, as much as possible, consolidate development in our cities where we have the best shot and making sure we have efficient use of our waters, where we can look at how we do long-term tertiary water treatment, where we can look at other long-term storage needs. And then at the same time, the county is going to have to really partner with our rural communities to be able to help them through what will inevitably be a long-term discussion about our groundwater use. We have not worked nearly well enough to prepare for this. We knew it was coming. We ignored it till it showed up. And now it's time for long-term planning and more difficult but honest conversations. Thank you.
David.
Yeah, I don't know why my opponent is so dug in on this issue and not listening to the experts in the field. This is not something new. The county has been talking about drought. Actually, I've been talking about drought since 2014, the first time we did a water hauling program, and we wanted to make sure that we had some answers to that. You know, the regional water supply resiliency study, now underway and has been underway, and much of the work is out there, is to increase supply. You're talking about groundwater production. You're talking about winter water diversion. You're talking about a regional groundwater bank. Up in Alexander Valley, you've got the Floodmar program, SDC water supply in Forebay for groundwater recharge, expand recycled water, which I've done. as chair of the North Bay Water Reuse Authority for the last 8 years. Again, $190 million in infrastructure. You have interconnections. You do that at the same time that you reduce demand through conservation and efficiency. And we've been doing that and actually using less water today than we even have a year or 2 or 3 or 5 ago. You improve operations. If you've noticed, there's been construction down at the Castania pump station. Those improvements will help. You expand surface storage through sediment and weir projects that we have underway. FIRO, Forecast Informed Reservoir Operations at Lake Sonoma, 5 to 10% better water management going forward. You increase recycled water storage, the second phase of North Bay Water Reuse Authority. You do storage operational management levels. Lake Mendo has a variable gates and outlet channel improvements coming online to have more water within that reservoir. And then lastly, you modify policy and regulations through flexibility through our temporary urgency change petitions. It's a complex system. It takes a while to understand how it actually works. It's not as simple as saying it's a battery and not a whatever, because the experts will tell you that if you take excess winter flows from the Russian River, which has excess flows each and every year, including times of drought, and get them into the aquifer, you can pull that up and you don't deplete the aquifer. You don't dry the aquifer out. Going forward, that would be very beneficial.
Thank you, Supervisor. Kevin, your thoughts?
Well, I don't agree with Rabbit. Definitely not. There's a limited supply in aquifers. In Petaluma, residential wells are having to be dug even deeper because we are using too much of the water. You know, it does have to be replenished. His idea about the Russian River, well, you know, the river needs to flow. We need to have fish to be able to go into the water. There's life that actually lives in the river that needs the water. There really isn't that much excess flow. It needs to flow out to the water to get the steelhead trout in. We should be taught, we really are tapped out where we can get more water. We can conserve where we can. We can beef up our water recycling program. We need to assess how much water we are using. A lot of this building is going to use more water. We got to slow down, probably really slow down the building and really assess how much water we are going to get throughout the years. Because from what I understand, the long-term forecast, we're going to be getting less and less water for the next 20 years. I don't think we've been doing a great job, but I applaud to the stuff that we're doing, that he was talking about, the Alexander Valley Reservoir, the recycling program. But I think we can't be just conserving and recycling our water out of this. We have to look at the demand of water because our supply is less. And building new houses, a lot more vineyards is going to be using more water. And I don't think the building development is taking that in consideration. A lot of people who say building development, that, oh, people who are against building will mention about the water crisis. Well, because the water crisis is true. We are running out of water and we can do a lot better. Desalination is really the next step besides recycling and conserving more water. Again, it has a lot of problems, cost, brine waste, energy, and taste. But I really do think we need to start looking at that because it takes years to do anything near our California coast through the regulations and permitting. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin, and for providing a preview of the follow-up question I have, which is this. There is a vein of criticism that while drought persists, no new construction should be approved, which obviously impacts our housing goals. Can you share your thoughts on that critique, which we often see at the local level, starting with David?
Yeah, you know, most utility certificates are put out by cities based upon general plan build out of that particular city, taking into account the water usage that's required. In Petaluma, I don't think there's ever been a general plan that has reached full build out because every time a project comes up, less and less units are built. I put that out there to say that there still will be droughts, there still will be conservation measures, there still will be mandatory conservation measures, but there is that block of water that's available for those new units. Those new units use less water than probably the existing unit, than I know for the existing units going forward. And you know what's interesting on the waterfront, through that plan that I was telling you about, and this came out at the Water Advisory Committee, the Technical Advisory Committee, where the water experts actually sit and consult with the contractors going forward, is that if you model going forward, even a 1976 drought year on top of the 2 years that we've already had, there is a 1% probability that Lake Sonoma will have a storage issue. 1%. That means that 99% probability that it won't going forward. It doesn't mean that you stop and not move forward on all those issues that I spoke about, but I'm just putting it in perspective. You know, we have to keep it in perspective going forward. We have to continue going forward, listen to the experts in their fields. Sonoma Water, I am very proud to be associated with Sonoma Water. They've always been leading the state, if not the nation, on these types of issues. And, you know, we also have in this state, you have Sacramento telling us that we have to increase our densities, building densities and housing units by twice. At the same time, we are entering a third year of a drought. It's a state issue that needs to be resolved as well. And we really need to figure out which one comes first, the drought or the housing. Actually, I think you can do both if you do it smartly and you make sure that you continue to make the investments that the county has been making.
Thank you. Kevin, you're up next if you want to continue with your thread from before.
Continue with my thread. Yeah, I think we do need to halt the housing. I don't care what the state is mandating. We have a limited resources with water, and it definitely needs to be taken in consideration. Sorry, I have a cat that's playing with my computer. So yeah, I would be the one guy saying, yeah, let's stop the building. Let's halt the more permits and actually assess how much water we have. We can't all be conserving water and rationing water for the rest of our lives. That just can't happen. Well, he said 1% Mendocino Lake was going to have a storage issue. Mendocino Lake had a storage issue just this last year. It practically ran dry. It looked like a desert when I was up there. So your percentages, I think, are just way off. And it's not in consideration of the new climate change that's happening right now. So yeah, I would be slowing down growth due to our water crisis.
Blake, would you want to share your thoughts?
I would love to. One thing I'd like to point out is that climate change does not care about what we want when it comes to use of water or housing development. And when it comes to new development, this is why partnerships with our cities are so important. 90% new housing is 90% more efficient when it comes to water. We can also get expansion of purple pipe, which is how we use more reuse water in our cities, because as we know, our county infrastructure in this regard is pretty poor. And there is the other thing I would like to point out is that you can't go just blaming the state. The RENA numbers, which force us to plan for more development at the city and the county level, are created in part through the Association of Bay Area Governments, of which David Rabbitt was the president emeritus in 2019. We're dealing with the calculation of RENA numbers that was imposed upon us, and we had a representative that didn't really seem to care too much about what that would look like for us. So if we're going to talk about how we deal with drought and building and how we move forward, we have to keep in mind that these city partnerships will grow that much more important in order to ensure that we can meet the numbers that have been mandated upon us, and at the same time, reduce the amount of water use that we have at play. And I would also just like to say that if we're talking about expertise, you can talk about a handful of experts, and Sonoma County, Sonoma Water does have expertise, and I really appreciate a lot of the staff who are there. But you're also talking about a lot of the same people who are involved in the private diversions that also help make this problem worse. There are a broad network of experts when it comes to water use who've pointed out the problems we've had for a very long time, and it's why I'm endorsed by both the Sierra Club and SCCA, because we have not been taking our water use seriously enough, and this comes to bear when we're dealing with new development. Thank you.
Thank you, Blake. Along with drought comes the looming danger of strong, dangerous fire seasons. What is the county's role in fire prevention and firefighting? And if necessary, how could our approach be improved? We'll start with Kevin, then Blake, then David.
Well, we can improve on fire suppression and fire mitigation techniques. I'm talking about having grazing animals, goats, grazing animals in our parklands, because this land was grazed. We used to have tule elk and a lot more deer, so there was always a grazing issue. And as a matter of fact, the Pomos and the Miwoks used to do fire suppression because it's a natural thing in our environment. We need to go after the unincorporated areas and get more fire surfaces in the unincorporated areas. It's just, I think we definitely need more mitigation on fire suppression. I know a lot of people don't want to clear the forest, but we can clear a lot of it naturally. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I think working on mitigation and fire services is definitely needed.
Thank you, Kevin. Blake, next word is yours.
So we have desperate needs in terms of where we need to be when it comes to both prevention and response. I've worked with people who have lost everything in a fire. It takes them years to get through current federal and state processes to get that help. No one wants to be in that position. The problem is when you look at most of this county, most of us are potentially at that risk. When it comes to prevention, we need year-long vegetation management that needs to be funded. We need to look at what Relief is doing when it comes to fire-resistant trees that'll better create fire barriers for us. We also need to make sure that we're supporting our cities and supporting our rural neighborhoods with the needed funding when it comes to essentially rebuilding some of their roofs, their vents, structures that easily catch fire, easily take in vents. Most homeowners can't afford that. Most renters can't afford that. There's state grants to go after to help with that, and it's something the county should be doing. When it comes to response, I know that at the county level, we're something like 15 fire engines short, including staffing. Yes, we did have consolidation recently, and I appreciate that that move has come, but that is essentially consolidation without the long-term funding that's needed. There was an attempt at a sales tax that failed. They're going to try and do another sales tax that I suspect will fail. And I suspect it will fail because I've been the only one doing the canvassing in this election. And I can tell you, most folks can't afford another sales tax. So if we're going to look at long-term fire needs, we have to look at a new way to fund them. And that's going to take seriously looking at how state and federal grants could come to play, how we can merge certain funding sources when it comes to the already consolidation of our fire services, and be honest about what those needs are going to be in the long run. And furthermore, I just want to say we rely heavily on CAL FIRE to come to our rescue when we have some of these spot grass fires. That will not always be the case, which is why we need to actually finish staffing up our fire needs at the county level. Thank you.
Thank you, Blake. David, the last word.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that CAL FIRE comes to the rescue. My son is a firefighter for CAL FIRE, and he says it's snowing today up at Boggs Mountain at the Helitack port up there. We did approve a landmark series of tax exchange agreements, not just consolidating 43 fire service agencies to 23, but actually improving the fire protection and really ensuring long-term sustainability of all fire services in the county. That includes the city of Petaluma. Mutual aid is a wonderful thing. If there's a structure fire in Petaluma, you'll see fire engines from multiple agencies, sometimes up to 5. You certainly see them covering stations. We don't, everyone shares firefighters throughout the county. I think the other thing that I wanted to say was on alert and early warning, emergency preparedness. We've tested new multilingual alert and warning systems. You know, through my work on the State Seismic Safety Commission, where we started to work on the earthquake early warning systems, that developed for this county into fire cameras. Those, it turned out that you could actually get more funding for fire cameras statewide than you could for the earthquake early warning system. And the fire cameras became the main mechanism to actually put then the earthquake sensor beneath it. But that, I'm proud of my role in that. And it led to, if you talk to our University of Reno and University of San Diego colleagues who lead that program, that led to dozens of new fire cameras here in Sonoma County, which keep us safe. Yes, we need to have strategic vegetation management. We need to have strategic healthy forest management as well. That means that you ask the experts, relying on the experts who fight the fires, where the best place to stop that fire might be. And then you have a continuous either shaded field break, access points, whatever it may be that they deem necessarily going forward. So, and for the home hardening, this county received brick grants from FEMA for home hardening coming forward. And that's going to allow people to do the fire hardening that was mentioned earlier.
Thank you, David. Sonoma County has been under a microscope at times in the past year for the county's inability to hold on to key leaders, particularly women of color in positions of power. Why is that? And what would you do to fix it? Blake, you have the floor.
Well, this is where we have a significant leadership problem and culture problem when it comes to the county. We've lost 2 high-profile leaders in the last 2 years. And at the same time, we've had plenty of other county employees come forward concerned with microaggressions, having issues with racism in the county. This is not an issue of outside of the community folks tormenting people at schools, as my opponent mentioned in another debate. No, this is an issue of having a culture that has not evolved with the time. We need to desperately look at how we handle HR issues. We need to completely reevaluate how we address, how we respond to issues revolving racism and involving other issues of interpersonal problems at the county. It's not enough to just appoint people and assume that that solved the problem. There's a reason why communities of color in this county do not trust public engagement processes. When we had a wildfire response plan that was mandated by the state, the county still ignored most of the contributions made by communities of color that took the time to try and provide recommendations. When it comes to our farm workers having concerns about how they're going to evacuate, the county continues to punt the vote and ignore the issue. When it comes to how we handled redistricting, most of the redistricting board was utterly ignored and had done a great deal of work to focus on equity in the county to have more equitable outcomes for county elections. And when it comes to many of our programs, like the Cura Project, this county likes to front load responsibilities onto nonprofits that clearly can't handle all of it and avoid making the kind of long-term relationships necessary to have real engagement and ownership from our communities of color. The only way to change this is with a culture change, and you're not going to see this from somebody who's been in office for 12 years already. You won't get a shift in another 4. Thank you.
David.
Yeah, it's hard to ignore that you're asking a question to a panel of all white men about what needs to change for women of color. You know, obviously this is work I believe that we all share. It's never isolated to one entity or one institution, but within the broader community. And personally, I had a great working relationship with our former health services director. She's a strong woman of color who was brought in to make changes and clean up some lingering issues within the department. She excelled at her job. That she or anyone else who works for the county or anywhere within the county experiences bias or microaggressions is simply unacceptable, just full stop. You know, once the pattern of workplace bias and microaggressions came to light, the county took immediate action, reaching out to all employees, giving department heads the resources for staff and management trainings, education. We accelerated the work within the Office of Equity, which we created, the Racial Equity Core Team. These trainings are ongoing. You know, it should be noted that the county has 4,200 employees at the moment. The board itself participated in identifying bias and microaggressions and is committed to lead by example and doing the work to learn, to listen, and to ensure that everyone can show up to work authentically free from any form of discrimination.
Thank you, David. Kevin.
Well, first, you need to elect an outsider, not someone involved in Sonoma County government as my opponents are. Nepotism and friendships help, you know, keep institutional racism going because people will forgive their friends and nepotism people they know over the bad issue. We need to remember we can do better and we need to stick to it. We need to define our commitment to diversity and inclusion. They can't just be this vague that we're equal opportunity. We need to actually define what we're gonna do and define what is actually wrong, you know, like the microaggression and all that stuff, and actually stick to it and put teeth to it. We need to promote diverse leadership. We need to hire people who are from, you know, different backgrounds into leadership positions like the 2 people that unfortunately left. We need to track the progress and monitor the turnover. And we need to have this data applied publicly so that the public knows how many folks that we are hiring and how many folks are leaving due to microaggressions and institutional racism. We need to recognize that other people have multiple identities. They could be, you know, sexual orientation, their immigration status, race and stuff. They can have multiple, which will compound the problem. We also need to continue the dialogue because racism is not just going to magically disappear. We also need to elect government officials with the conviction to fight racism. I am the only one here who has sacrificed myself to fight racism. I have been pushed, beaten, pepper sprayed in fighting racism. I am the only candidate who has sacrificed to fight racism. For most other issues, you only need 3 out of 5 votes to do stuff. But on this issue of uprooting institutional racism, one supervisor can make a difference. I will make that difference. I will dedicate my office to fight this institutional racism that's going on in the county level. And I'll invite folks to come and tell me about their issues so that I can actually investigate it. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. And I want to thank each of you for coming on here and sharing your views. We're down to 2 more questions and then final thoughts from each of you. Also want to thank the dozens of people who have stayed on throughout this discussion. Obviously, some engaged residents eager to hear what each of you have to say on these important topics. With that said, we'll get to it. David, you'll have the first crack at this one. The coronavirus pandemic seems to have touched most aspects of life, and that includes our daily commutes. What is the state of regional transit, and what role do you see Sonoma County supervisors playing in improving it if necessary?
Well, I think I have the most expertise to answer that one. As a director of the Golden Gate Bridge, finance chair on the bridge, I can tell you, we are happy to report that we are only losing $750,000 a week as opposed to $1 million a week, which was occurring only a little while ago. Commute patterns have changed. There's no question about it. AM PM peaks are not what they once were. There's a lot more cars traveling throughout the day, and that's really reflective of people's work conditions. A lot more people with telecommuting. There's a lot more people taking certain days off and not others. At SMART, we're looking at really shifting from a commute railroad to really a transportation system that may have have a lot more riders during the middle of the day or on the weekends. The weekends have really taken off, and was glad as chair of SMART to bring back Sunday service going forward and expanding the service on June 13th, as well as keeping the fares low and providing for free parking. All of that is helping, especially when gas is about $6 a gallon. But certainly commute patterns have changed. It also means that there's certain additional pressures on us, including housing. Petaluma has seen that. An influx of people that were able to move up here, buy homes with cash, driving prices up because they were no longer having to commute anywhere. Essential workers still obviously need to get to their places of work going forward. So, right now, if you look at the commute patterns, it's still a bit in flux. It's not returned to the pre-COVID numbers. It may not. It may look very different. And I think, no matter what anyone here says, that there's that path of trying to find where that will be going forward to make sure that we can serve that population adequately. At the same time, knowing that the financial picture of transit, not just here locally, but in the at the federal level, has changed. My Programming and Allocations Committee has doled out nearly $4 billion in COVID relief alone to the 27 transit agencies in the Bay Area to keep them up and running during the pandemic.
Thank you, David, for quickly wrapping that up. Kevin, what is the state of regional transit, and what role do you see Sonoma County supervisors playing in improving it if necessary?
It definitely needs improvement. I'm probably one of the guys who's probably not so enamored of the SMART train. Rabbit likes to boast that he brought the prices low, but he only brought the prices low during the campaign. He was gouging you all these years with the high prices of SMART train, which did influence ridership. So to be boasting that, oh, I'm saving you money during the campaign, I brought it down, that's just not genuine, because he was actually gouging you before. I think the supervisor needed really look into the SMART. I would never called it SMART train in the first place. It just seems like a light rail with one track is not so smart. I would definitely want to expand more services. I want to have go later in the evening, especially during the weekends. So I do see the supervisor's role of doing the transit system, but obviously I have 2 transit people on here. I'm gonna have a lot more specifics on this particular issue. But I do think the county does have a role to play in it. Unfortunately, I am going to be the one who's saying I don't think they've been doing a very good job, anyone in the transportation department, especially calling it SMART.
Thank you, Kevin. Blake.
Well, I'd just like to say that the state of our kind of regional transit while it is not doing very well at the moment, there's a serious opportunity here for a supervisor with an actual vision for regional transit. To begin with, our smart train should be the spine when it comes to regional transit going north to south. There was an opportunity to expand it all the way out to Cloverdale, which would have happened by adding it to MTC's 5-year project list. But when that funding opportunity came up, current supervisor voted against it and kept pushing back. When a new president came into office and other representatives fighting for their transit dollars in Santa Clara and San Jose got their projects on, we didn't. Why that's important is because Caltrans very much wanted to connect the Capital Corridor line to Cloverdale. And that would have been a huge connection point for us when it comes to regional transit fares. The other component of this is working with Golden Gate, Santa Rosa Transit, as well as SCTA as a whole and Petaluma Transit. There's an opportunity to shift how we're doing this so that we are taking people from the train to high population areas and taking them back, where we can invest in shuttles, where we can invest in better transit times. And at the same time, we obviously have to run the smart train at lower fares and more times. Now, it is lovely that in the middle of a gas crisis, we are now doing this, but we should have been doing this from the start. And we're going to need to keep doing this, even if we take a financial hit. The reason why is because most people will tell you in transit, when you're establishing a new transit operation, you run at a deficit, you operate with more times than you can, you operate longer than you can, and you do that to build trust. We're talking about pre-COVID numbers versus COVID numbers now in terms of transit. The reality is this is our opportunity to change how people act regionally. And I'm supported on this by the Amalgamated Transit Union, the very people the current supervisor works with and the very people who are tired of seeing regional transit not carried forward properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Blake. And if you do have a response to previous questions, we do have one more question left, and you can wrap that response in. And we could not rightfully have a forum for District 2 or probably any district without getting into cannabis. Conflicts between rural residential property owners and cannabis growers seem to be accelerating. How can Sonoma County best address that conflict moving forward? Starting with Kevin, moving to Blake, and then David, you get the last word on this one.
How can we resolve the conflict between rural and the cannabis industry? That's a hard one. I'm actually for the cannabis industry. I'll admit that I'm a cannabis user and I use just the right amount. We do need to take consideration of the neighbors of what they're saying. So if there's a rural community like down on Pepper Road here in Petaluma, they don't want cannabis. We should listen to them. But there's other parts of the rural community that will accept the cannabis industry. So I would listen to the rural folks. If they don't want cannabis in their particular neighborhoods and stuff, I'll agree with that, because I'm all about listening to the neighbors. As resolving it is just basically that, listening to neighbors who don't want it and allow places and neighbors who do want it. That's how I would resolve it. I would listen to them and I would agree with what they want because it's their neighborhood.
Thank you, Kevin. Blake, your thoughts?
So we obviously need to have setbacks for our rural neighbors. We obviously need to listen to our neighbors, but we also need to see this as a high value crop for the county. And for a lot of our dairy farmers and a lot of our small farming operations, a saving grace when it comes to long-term revenue needs. There's a way where we can have our cake and eat it too. And part of that is because we really need to focus on an updated general plan with a zoning map that actually designates rural neighborhoods, actually designates the setbacks, and actually uses the ongoing EIR to determine where these grows should be. Now, we needed an EIR far before this process. I will say the current supervisor admitted to being wrong in this process, did bring up needing to have one to move forward, and I understand that. But the reality is we need to look forward working together with a rural community to actually make sure that we've set up a zoning map where it's very clear how and when and where we can plant. And beyond moving forward beyond that, we also need to completely overhaul our permitting department. They have used contracted permitting or contracted planners, which have not only messed up and confused the existing cannabis that we've allowed to grow, but have often created redundant processes and led to people getting very angry, including our rural communities, because they've been told one thing and then another thing happens. The reality is, moving forward, we can work together to have the cannabis that'll benefit our county while also respecting our rural neighborhoods. But if we're going to do that, we need clear processes, a clear zoning map, clear zoning code. And that is something that we have kicked down the road far too often. We're going through a process now, but this is where the robust community engagement is important, because this should be part of the general plan. Thank you.
David, how best can Sonoma County address the conflict between rural residential property owners and cannabis growers moving forward?
Thank you very much. And as someone who actually has worked on general plans in the past and passed them, a general plan alone is not going to solve all of your problems. I think, and I'm not sure what my opponent said regarding my position on the EIR. I was in support of doing an environmental document impact report the entire time, and it finally came back. And I think Susan Gorin's quote was, "You told us so, David," because I knew we had to do an EIR going forward. I also think, and I was opposed to the piecemealing of ministerial permits, which also got rescinded, because that was just a CEQA loophole going forward. And this is only about outdoor cannabis grows. This is not about nothing else. And it's about selecting the proper properties where that can take place. And in the South County, there are hundreds of places where you can grow cannabis and not bother a soul. The problem is you have folks from out of county coming in, buying cheaper parcels that are too close, too small, and too close to their neighbors. This isn't about dairies. A dairy won't have a problem with a 1,000-foot setback. It's about finding the appropriate properties, identifying those, which will happen through the EIR process. I'm glad that the ministerial permitting process has been suspended. And I think that we really need to work on neighborhood compatibility issues going forward on this. It's been a sore point for far too long, and it doesn't work well for the neighbors. It doesn't work well for the applicant either, as they get thrown into this mix. And it certainly doesn't work well for the county.
Thank you, David. I think that answers all of my questions. So thank you all for participating this evening. Before we go, I want to give each of you 2 minutes here for closing statements. The last word, if you will. We'll start with Blake, then we'll have David, followed by Kevin.
Thank you very much, Tyler. And thank you to the Argus and the Chamber for this opportunity to speak to everyone in District 2 about the importance of voting in this race on or before June 7th. We need new leadership in District 2. We've reached a moment here in Sonoma County where 12 years ago, we were in a moment where we had to reckon with a financial crisis and make tough decisions to cut costs. But that time has passed. In 2022, all of Sonoma County needs to be united to solve the housing crisis. All of Sonoma County needs to be united to put a halt to skyrocketing PG&E bills. All of Sonoma County needs to be united to slow the growth of traffic on our main roads and highways so that our painful investment in a new lane on Highway 101 doesn't need to be repeated before the end of this decade. All of Sonoma County needs to be united to prepare our homes and businesses for the next wildfire, next flood and pandemic. And every single mayor in District 2 understands that we are no longer in a moment where a county government can go it alone, and understands that cutting costs also means investing in the long term. 2/3 of mayors in Sonoma County want meaningful partnerships with the county, and they want a board of supervisors who are ready to work with our cities to face challenges of the next decade and not dwell on the problems of 12 years ago. If you're going to have a functional supervisor, you have to have someone who's a team player and knows how to work together. And if you don't have the support of your local electeds, you're in trouble. I'm running for supervisor with the support of a majority of council members in my district, with organizations such as the Sierra Club and Sonoma County Conservation Action. And in this race, where all three candidates are registered Democrats, I'm the only candidate who has earned the endorsement of the Democratic Party in an open application process. My name is Blake Hooper. I'm running for supervisor so you and your family can build a life here in South Sonoma County. I'm a renter. My wife and I are both renters. I was raised here. We understand just how painful times are right now. And we're not going to be able to move forward successfully if we don't have a change of leadership. Thank you.
Supervisor Rabbit.
Thank you again to the Argus and the Chamber for hosting, and for everyone for listening in tonight. As I mentioned when we started tonight, you heard a lot of criticizing and you heard a lot of vagaries from my opponents with little substance or detail. Again, that's what you do when you have no record to run on. The bottom line for me is I get things done. And during my tenure as supervisor, we have fully funded the Highway 101 widening project, and it will soon be complete from Novato to Windsor. We have paved more than 433 miles of county roads, spending more discretionary general fund dollars on paving than any other county in California. We opened a Health and Human Services satellite office in Petaluma, providing much needed services to South County residents. We invested nearly $190 million in recycled water infrastructure, millions more in seismic upgrades, and we've embarked along a robust drought resiliency strategy, taking into account our changing climate. We've doubled the acreage in our county park system and opened the largest county park right here in the South County at Tole Lake Regional Park. We created 3 new county departments, the Office of Equity, the Independent Office of Law Enforcement Review and Outreach, and the Department of Emergency Management. You don't achieve any of that without collaboration. I have led the county through difficult times. The first supervisor in over 50 years to be chair in back-to-back years, and perhaps the only supervisor to be recognized for leadership by both the North Bay Labor Council and the Sonoma County Taxpayers Association. I have been endorsed by Congressman Mike Thompson, State Senators Bill Dodd and Mike McGuire, Assembly members Levine, Wood, and Aguiar-Curry. I believe they're all Democrats. For more information, please visit my website, www.davidrabbit.com for details, or email me at david@davidrabbit.com. I have been honored to serve as your Sonoma County Supervisor, and I ask for your vote.
And also the first with a website plug. Thank you for that, Supervisor Rabbit. Kevin, the final word.
Well, thank you all for your time, and it's been an honor speaking to you. We need members of the board with the courage to do the will of Sonoma County folks, to do what's best for Sonoma County. Our current Supervisor Rabbit is not cutting it. And my other competitor, Hooper, wants to tax you to pay for a $1.6 billion wasteful project, moving county offices at a time of high inflation. That is not wise. As supervisor, I'm working for you. A candidate not having experience in politics or government should not sway your vote. Ukraine elected a comedic actor, Volodymyr Zelensky, with no government experience as president. Today, President Zelensky is considered the most courageous leader in the world. It's time for a change. It's time to elect courage to the board, which is severely lacking. It's time to have hardworking folks with experience in hardship to hold this office. It's time for an outsider to be a supervisor to uproot the institutional racism in Sonoma County government, the way only an outsider, someone not currently part of the Sonoma County government system, can do. We need to be the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. If you care as passionately as I do about moving Sonoma County forward, then vote for me, Kevin Hayenga, for a better future. And please be part of this movement and tell the Democratic Party to support working folks and social justice issues and not wasteful taxing and wasteful spending like they just did with Blake Hooper. I'm asking for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you all. And thanks to those who tuned in to watch tonight's forum. As promised, we've got one more opportunity for engagement. So let's see, we'll do a poll here. Have the candidates' words moved you? Do we have a change from our original poll? Please take the time to vote now. We'll give you 30 seconds. The candidates, you feel free to vote for yourselves. All right, so we have a very close race. but Blake Cooper edges the field with 51% of the votes. We'll wrap up voting for now. That was a fun exercise, and this was a fun evening. But an important reminder for all of you, this vote is no replacement for doing your civic duty. So the real voting starts this week. Check your mailboxes for ballots, which should arrive any day now. Thank you all again, and good night.
Thanks, Tyler.